Welcome back to the Atlas Hour, your source of all things human optimization. This week on the Atlas Hour, we have Jason Khalipa. You may know Jason Khalipa as being a prominent figure within the CrossFit community. Jason Khalipa started out his career by winning the 2008 CrossFit Games, then going on to win the CrossFit Regionals 5 times and getting on the podium in the CrossFit Games 2 other times. Jason's career eventually ended in CrossFit in 2016 when his daughter came down with leukemia and he quit to take care of her. Now, I've looked up to Jason for years. When I was active in CrossFit, Jason was hands down my favorite CrossFitter. I've always loved the work capacity and just pure grit that Jason brings to everything that he does. Jason runs a podcast, Effort Over Everything, and I think that just embodies everything that Jason is. He is effort. Today, we talk about all the things that have made Jason successful. Jason's been successful in CrossFit as a business leader and now Jujitsu. And today, Jason teaches us that it's not the drugs you're doing or the supplements or the program you're running that makes you successful. It comes down to the effort that you're willing to put into whatever it is you're trying to do. I think you guys will learn a lot this episode, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you do, please hit that like button, share with your friends, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that YouTube stuff. And don't forget to check out our website, atlas-optimization.com, where you can get all of your nutritional needs met, from meal plans to one-on-one coaching, whatever you need. Or check me out over at Marek Health, where you can meet with a health coach and you can meet with me for guided optimization. Enjoy the episode, guys.
And we're good to go. Let's get it.
Awesome. Welcome, guys. Welcome back to the Atlas Hour. This is episode number 16 with the one and only Jason Khalipa, somebody who I have looked up to for years. I was just showing Josh the picture of you and I at the 2012 regionals that I sent you, last year. It's a trip. It's crazy to be talking to you again, man, because again, you're one of the people that I really look up to as far as like role models in the space. So happy to have you.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate it. I'm happy to be here, ready to rock. Whatever you guys want to talk about, I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, for those of our listeners who may not know who you are, maybe you can give us a little background on who you are. I mean, I think your claim to fame was really kind of winning the 2008 games, and then probably even, I would say, you're probably more impressed with some of the later achievements that you had in the games as well. So maybe you can just give a little background.
Yeah. So, I started off in the fitness space really young. I was 15, started working at the front desk at a traditional health club, got introduced to bodybuilding, kind of, like that, but I was playing more traditional sports, football, track and field, etc. So then when I graduated from high school, I ended up getting into a sales role at that particular gym, fell in love with the business of fitness, learned a lot about it. As that went on, I was introduced to CrossFit back in like 2006. I then, kind of deep dove into that and won the CrossFit Games, ended up opening a gym at that point and blending kind of like this business background with this CrossFit background. And we then opened up the gym. It was called NorCal CrossFit originally. We branded over time to NC Fit. And so now we own and operate gyms. We do corporate wellness. We have digital products. And then my competitive background, I competed professionally in CrossFit for 8 years. And now I kind of pivoted away from the sport in 2016 professionally. I found Jujitsu, really fell in love with that. And so now I, CrossFit regularly, hit the mats regularly, and just trying to train hard. That's it. I got 2 kids and trying to keep up with them.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. And one of the reasons why I think I've always looked up to you is just, you definitely exude this like effort. You everything that you do, you go kind of full force. And I'm somebody who's like that. Josh is someone who's like that. I really look up to people who just, give everything their all. I hope you don't take this as an insult, but when I was big into CrossFit, I would love to watch you because you certainly weren't the prettiest out there. You can even probably make the argument that a lot of your movement was pretty damn ugly and inefficient,
pretty bad.
But you were always like, in the top because you just had so much grit and like, you just didn't give up. So there's people out there like, Froning moves perfectly. You're like every angle is awesome. And then there's Jason out there just manhandling things where you're like, oh my God, he's wasting so much energy right now, but he just would not quit. There was never any quit in you. And I loved that. And then we've seen that translate into other things. Like, I think you're probably one of the first in the space to kind of corporatize the fitness scene as far as CrossFit, because CrossFit was kind of like the outlier, like punk kids of the fitness space. And you were the one that was like, hey, you know what, I'm going to start making some money off this and, go down the business aspect side of things. And you seem to be crushing it there. So when did you like develop that? Was that something just inherent in you from like childhood, or was there a time that you felt like was there any impetus to your determination that you have to just excel in everything that you do?
Oh, I think there's a long way for all of us to go, I think. But yeah, as far as like the movement and stuff, yeah, I look back on some of the videos, I'm like, damn, my fuck. But it's like at the time you just grind it out, and obviously efficiency and good movement breeds in general better performances. But what you find over time is that I don't know. For me, like I look at like back on like some of these like grace workouts and clean and jerks and different stuff. And I think to myself, man, if I had just improved my proficiency, but like maybe for me at that time, you're tired, it was the best way for me to try and think that I was going to try and win that event. But yeah, some of them are ugly, man. And then some of them also is connecting your brain with your body, which is really interesting. If you look back on, so 2009 CrossFit Games, I go in as the current champion. I end up blacking out on this first run. And what that was just, and we could talk more about this, but that was just like a mental I was overly fatigued. I just couldn't handle it. And so I blacked out. The following year though, what's really interesting is that I came in with a first and a fifth. So I was the favorite to win that year too. And the event was at night. It was underneath the lights at Carson. And dude, the jets flew over. National anthem was played. It was like, fuck, yeah. And then, it was two movements that are highly complex, which is the muscle up and a full snatch. And what happened was at that point, even though my technique was more proficient in general, like I was able to do those movements in the gym really well. When you got into that circumstance where your brain and your body are at a heightened level, it just broke down on me. And so sometimes that would happen as well, because I would just try and throttle so much that I couldn't continue connecting. Even though I knew what to do, my body just wouldn't go with it. But anyways, in regards to like work ethic and stuff like that, obviously I just think that over time I've had some really good mentors, and I'm just inspired by myself to, I still do this every single day. It's like last night I was in the sauna late, and I was just thinking to myself, how am I doing as a husband, a father, as a business owner, as an athlete, and which area can I improve on and reach my potential? And I think that the greatest thing that I worry about the most is looking back on certain areas of my life later on and being like, damn, I didn't reach my potential there. And it really inspires me, because I don't want to be that guy, 6 years old, looking back, being like, I could have done this better, or I could have taken this opportunity. So those are the things I think about regularly. I think you're on mute, by the way.
Yep. Can't hear you.
You're right. I don't know how that happened. You're right. I was on mute. I was gonna say, I think that it's just awesome, because, if you look at you, when you look at you out there next to all the other guys, you were a bigger dude. You look like a freaking gorilla, you looked like a bodybuilder for sure. And it's like, it wasn't the most, you didn't have the body that was genetically, like a Froning body, or I don't know, a Spieler or something. I guess you could say he's kind of smaller too. He's the difference of you. But there is a certain kind of phenotype that one would say is a perfect CrossFit body, and too big is not it. But I always thought it was cool, because you were like, screw that. I don't care if I'm genetically not gifted enough. Like, I will have the work ethic to make sure that I don't quit. And that gets you so far. And I think you can see that in like your business ethic and everything too. I'm guessing you didn't really come from a very affluent family that was able to pass you down money and teach you all about corporations and how to run it. I would assume it was probably just a lot of grit on that end too, and figuring shit out as you win. Am I right?
Yeah, that's the way it was went. Yeah. So my dad came from Iran. My mom, she came over here. My mom was from Rhode Island, and her grandparents were from Italy. So I'm like half Italian, but I'm half Persian. So my dad came right before the revolution, actually. And so yeah, that's kind of where they came from. So no, not some long-term wealth here in California or something like that. No real estate, trust fund, unfortunately.
It's awesome, because I feel like you embody everything that we kind of tried to start this podcast about, because just a little background, like Josh and I met through Marek, and both of us have a history with doing like PEDs and everything, and a lot of regrets around it, because we were just like, that was kind of stupid. We don't necessarily need that. And then we see all these guys coming through, who basically really just lack the effort and the willpower to do things. And they think that they need X hormone at X level in order to achieve it. And, both of us are like, no, actually, you just got to do the work, and that's why I liked people like yourself, because, it just seemed like the work got you to everything that you've succeeded in, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, PEDs is really interesting conversation to have with CrossFit. When I started competing in 2008, I won the CrossFit Games, and at the time, there was no drug testing or anything like that, but there also wasn't any money. When I won like $1,800, and my biggest sponsor was like a couple thousand. And then the next year it got bigger, and the next year it got bigger. Reebok came on in 2010, I believe, and so more money, more fame, more etc. But at the time, like PEDs, like it was never. And I've had my blood work done from Marek multiple times. People could look at it. I mean, I know now is different than before, but I don't take anything, and I never did, because at the time I was just thinking to myself, well, I'm at the top of the sport. I've been at the top of the sport forever, or for years, let's just say, and I haven't had to do anything from a performance enhancing drug perspective. And not to mention, they started doing a lot of testing, randomized testing, all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. So it never like inspired me to do it, because I felt like, why would I do it? If I'm already at the top, I'm getting tested. And then, the thing that really drove me to not ever really look into it, it wasn't like readily available around me. So it wasn't like it was like being flaunted to me at all. So I would have to go seek it. But the reason why I never did is because I always wondered to myself, later on in life, if I look back at my accomplishments, would I wonder, was it the PEDs that got me to win, or was it me? And that was something I really drew on, because I knew that my shelf life was limited competing professionally. And I always thought to myself, like, I wonder how I would feel if I went out there and I took first. But I'd always question for the next decade, 2 decades, whatever, if it was because of the enhancement or because of my, my abilities. So I never got into it. I don't judge anybody. They could do whatever they want. I think if you are competing in a sport, obviously you want to be fair. So if it's an open sport, you could do whatever you want. Go do whatever you want. If it's a closed sport, they're trying to get away from it. Obviously, I think that's wrong if someone is doing PEDs.
So, and you don't have to say any names or anything, but this is something that all the comments I got on Instagram wanted to know about PEDs and TRT, since we talk a lot about it. Was there anybody when you were in the height of it, was it anything that you heard like so-and-so was using this, or was there any talk about it, peptides, growth hormone, anything at all? Or was it just really hush hush?
Dude, I think that's a really good question. And I don't want to come off like soft, or like if I had more information, I wouldn't mind sharing it. Like I don't, like it's been years, like it's not a big deal. At my time, my tenure was from 2008 till 2016. During those years, right, CrossFit saw a lot of growth. But the guys at the top were the guys at the top. Like it was me, Froning, other names, right? Obviously, Matt Frazier came in, and Ben Smith, Chan, a bunch of them. From my perspective, being around the sport, being around these guys, spending a lot of time with them. Like there was times a year for 4 years straight, I competed in the Open, regionals, games, and then Team USA. And so I'd spend a lot of time with these people all over the country, all over the world. I never witnessed, nor heard of, nor heard anything of anybody doing anything at that point. I do think probably like right around 2016, there was probably more awareness of it. I think people probably started dabbling with it. But for me, there was a lot of drug testing. I don't know if anybody's been on your show and talked about this yet, but I mean, if you competed professionally in CrossFit, now I can't speak for it today, but when I was in it, I want to say like starting in like 2010, when there was more money, we started getting tested regularly. And what that looked like was when you qualified for the CrossFit Games through regionals, they would take like the top 3 or top 5, whoever qualified, and they'd immediately go get you tested right in the back immediately. So you wouldn't be able to touch anything, you wouldn't be able to talk to anybody. You'd have to immediately go. And at that point, it was tough because you're pretty dehydrated. So like what people don't know is like immediately after regionals, immediately after games, you were immediately taken to the back. There was also randomly selected people throughout the weekend to get tested as well. But if you podiumed, you were 100% tested. But it was always awkward because you'd finish the events. And, I was fortunate to podium 3 times. And you'd always... and then at regionals, I won it each year for 5 years. So you'd go in the back and they'd ask you to pee. And it's just like, dude, you got nothing. So you'd end up sitting there for like another hour, and your family just be waiting for you because you had to do it. Long story short, though, it ended up escalating. So it started off by just doing it then. Then what happened is they put you on like a drug list. And when I'm actually still currently on this list because they told me that if I took myself off, they would have to announce to the CrossFit community that I chose to get off this drug list. So I'm still on it. I guess I could still get randomly drug tested. I haven't been drug tested in years, but I guess I could. So what they did though, is they would just reach out to you the night before and say, hey, I'm coming to see you. And you would have to tell them when you were traveling. And basically, if you said you were going to be home, they would just show up at your house. And they then escalated it to actually visibly having to see the urine come out of you. Whereas earlier, they didn't have it that way. So I guess they grew it over time.
Interesting. Yeah, I've always kind of wondered too, because, you know, like you mentioned, Ben Smith. I mean, if you just look at I remember when he won, I think he went on a big news channel and they told him that he looked small or something. They were like, oh, I thought the fittest man on earth would be bigger. And
it was or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of funny, but it's true. I mean, if you look at him, he almost doesn't look like he lifts, but the dude was doing like, you know, just these effortless 300-pound cleans, which is really cool. But you would think that if he had anabolics in the mix and he's lifting that kind of weight, he probably would have had a significant amount of hypertrophy, or at least looked a little bit more jacked than he did. So I always wondered, I think where the best drugs for CrossFit would probably be as far as recovery, because these guys are doing like 3 or 4, 5 workouts a day, and most people can't recover from that kind of volume. So maybe something like peptides or growth hormone or something to speed up the recovery. But I think you can also make the argument that there's some anabolics that would have a detriment because some of them make you too pumped up and too bulky. You try to run or something, your back's pumped up and your calves are cramping. It's not going to be efficient or effective. So I don't know. It's interesting. I wish you had more dirt on some people, but I think it's good for people to hear too.
I don't have any dirt because honestly, I mean, but what I do know is that when I was at the height of the sport, like I was tested regularly all the time. And I mean, dude, there's been so many awkward situations with me and the drug tester. I mean, it's just been so uncomfortable. I mean, the guy just shows up to your house and I mean, if you just went pee, I mean, you got to wait. And it's just like,
yeah, that is tough. Last time I went to give my blood, I couldn't pee. And then I just came out and was like, never mind. Yeah, I'm not being tested, but it's so awkward when you can't go. And then you like really can't go because the psychological part of it's like messing you up. You get that stage fright.
Yeah.
That's funny, man. Well, what kind of, was there any like supplementation that people were using? Like, you know, creatine, aminos, anything that you felt was beneficial?
Right now, not really. I mean, it's tough because from a dirt perspective, like for me, I was training so much, so often, and same with like Froning and others, because I would spend time with these guys because we were training together. You would just kind of eat whatever you can, whatever you could, because you were training so much. Yeah. I think some protein supplementation was common. I think some people, you know, were doing creatine and stuff like that. For me, I didn't really mess with it. For me, I was just taking like a traditional protein supplement and just training hard and trying to get in the calories I could. You know, now my focus is shifted a little bit where it's more about recovery. So I'm, you know, taking turmeric supplements and different types of stuff like that because I want to try and have the best joint health I can because of all the abuse I've put my body through. But at the time, it was just like, and you know, and you know, the early stages of CrossFit was just like a blunt instrument. You know, it wasn't as calculated as it is today. I think now people are like really looking at their nutrition, really dialing in their. That's why I wouldn't be surprised if you see more PEDs now. Obviously, I think it's because the sport is evolving, the athletes are evolving, the money's evolved, whereas before it wasn't like that. So I wouldn't be surprised there's more now, but back then it was more just like grit. Like get in, crush yourself, and that's what's going to make you better. Frankly, probably to detriment. I think that if looking back on it, if we reduced training volume, was more calculated, I actually think performance would have been better.
Yeah, but I'm actually happy you said that because that's been my argument all along is that, well, in the beginning, I was definitely under the impression, like when I was CrossFitting, I've told the story a lot of times, like I started using PEDs at that time because I was, you know, listen to everybody and that Froning must be on PEDs because he's better than me. And so let me get the PEDs and then I'm still not Froning. And so instead of having, inflection of looking at myself, I go, his drugs are better than mine is the reason. It was never because I'm giving up on rep 15 where he's not dropping the bar until the 21 reps are done, and it was just like, eventually I had to come to that realization that no, they're just working a lot harder than I am. And it has nothing to do with the drugs or the supplements or the shoes or the clothes, whatever excuse you want to make for yourself. And then when I met you and you kind of allowed me to publicly look at your labs, and I'm looking at your testosterone, and I think it was in the 400s, and you still have a pretty similar physique to what you had then. And I could tell you from somebody who's ran a lot of gear myself and now is on the medical side of things, if you were big based on steroids alone and you were to come off and be a natural 400 like you are now, we would have expected to see a significant loss in like shrinkage. You can maybe argue that you're a little bit smaller because your sport has changed, but not much, Right. And so I was like, oh shit, maybe this guy's telling the truth. And then, I hope you don't mind me saying, I can edit out, but after Jason and I were done, he was like, dude, would I benefit from TRT? He was like actually kind of interested in it because I was like, your levels are low enough to need it. And he really seemed surprised, like, oh, wow, could I be better? Like it was funny.
Well, yeah, I mean, because for me, like, dude, the only time I'm going to hate on somebody for doing that is if it's unfair to others they're competing against.
Sure.
Like, you go do you. If you want to enhance your own body, like, go for it. Do whatever you want. And even if you're in a sport that's unregulated, like, it is what it is. But if you're in a regulated sport, I don't think that's fair because I don't like that. I think that's not in the heart of what sport is about. Sport is about competing on a level playing field. And if there's opportunities to have an advantage, of course, take them. But if that's at the expense of the rules, I don't think that's fair. But yeah, for me, I'm like, dude, could I benefit from TRT? And then I kind of understood more about it. I'm like, nah, man, I'm not really interested in that.
You told me your wife wasn't okay with that.
Well, fuck no. She probably thinks I don't need any more testosterone. So that's
No, I mean, it's just super cool. And then you can't see right now, but Josh is a freaking Greek god. The dude looks like he was a competitive bodybuilder, and now he runs freaking marathons with all that mass. And his testosterone's like 600. He is on TRT, but the level is lower. And so our argument is always like, dude, it's not all about the level of testosterone and the drugs and the supplements and the gear. It's literally about, the effort. And that's why I love the name of your podcast. For those of you who are listening, listen to Jason's effort over everything. It's so eloquently stated. It's like, that's what I've always seen you as. Like I said, even though it wasn't the prettiest, it was definitely the most effort out there, and it got you super far.
Yeah. And I think the testosterone conversation is really interesting. I think that, some of the things that I'm thinking about regularly is like, can I have increased benefits, obviously from cold exposure, but also just like really high intensity workouts. I find that there's just so much benefit. And it's really odd, and not to go off on a tangent here, but I wore a CGM, like a continuous glucose monitor, for 40 days. I wore one. I also just ate meat and some fruit for 40 days. And I wore a CGM for 40 days. And what was most interesting about it was my blood sugar spikes while rolling jujitsu at super high intensities. That was like the biggest takeaway I had, was like, if I was doing CrossFit, so if I was doing bodybuilding session, my blood sugar would like spike a little bit, of course. If I was doing CrossFit, spike a little bit more. And then if I was doing jujitsu, we're talking like a huge spike and then a huge dump. And I don't know from you guys, obviously with your medical background, what you guys think of that. But my take on it was that my body was like in a fight or flight mode. It was at a super high intensity. And I imagine there was testosterone, growth hormone benefits from doing that. And just wearing the CGM was just eye-opening for me, the difference in the levels of just blood sugar. I know that's just a variable. I just thought that was unique and weird. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense because you're exercising and there's so much of that sympathetic, which is the fight or flight. So you got epinephrine, cortisol, and your body's just cranking out the glucose. There could be growth hormone too. There's an argument because the growth hormone would suppress the insulin, which would put away the glucose. So yeah, it's just crazy because I think it's more so than just a workout, because it is a workout, but then there's that level of like fighting in there where, you're aggressive and you're trying to take somebody down and prevent yourself from getting hurt. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was
something.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say something that's more highly endurance based too. I feel like that when you're, really cranking your heart rate up over a long period of time like that, your body's dumping it because it really needs it at that point. I just know for me with, in comparison to like my low aerobic runs to ones where I'm really pushing a threshold, it's like I'm sure my body is just dumping glucose the entire time to try and fuel itself. So it's much more in demand rather than when you're mixing resistance training with, high intensity cardio in there at the same time. So I would theorize that's why you saw that a little bit.
Yeah. That was an interesting takeaway. Obviously, some other things I'm playing with when it comes to, fitness and nutrition is, like I was helping to coach a track meet the other day, and I was just watching these kids, and I was watching my daughter, and she was, anxious. And I think that, she was about to run the 400 meter. I've learned a lot about learning to calm my nerves and overcome that, which, I know we were talking a little bit about that earlier, but, with her, I'm starting to see it in her eyes, and she looked a little bit, she looked like almost like her blood sugar was dropping, like she was almost like a faint, not quite there. And I gave her some honeydew before her event, and it seemed to help her performance, just give that instant sugar spike. It's just interesting when you get more and more into the fitness space and how your body is relating to it, but then also where your mind connects to, and how all three of those play into factors, because the nutrition and the physicality is huge. But what people don't realize, especially if like they're anxious about something, like if you have an event at night, all day, if you're thinking about that event, your body's consuming energy and it's stressing itself out, even though you think it's not. So
yeah.
Anyways, not to go off on a tangent, that's something that's really interesting about how it connects all together.
It's huge. Like if I'm about to go on a big podcast hours before it's the same as like when I take board exams and stuff in school, I'll get a weird smelling sweat. It's like a stress sweat. And it's like, I'm like kind of like a little bit all day. And I just feel like there's so much cortisol right now. It feels crazy. My first like local CrossFit competition, remember I took pre-workout. Was the worst idea I ever did. Because I took pre-workout thinking I'm about to go work out all day. I need caffeine. And then we're in like they had us line up before we're about to go out there. And my hands are just like, and it was like, it would be a minute. It was like 10 minutes of 1 minute max row with 1 minute max, like dumbbell snatch. So you would just go back and forth. Like I was about to puke the entire time because I was just so stressed out. My snatches were like my hands shaking all over the place. It was crazy. But that was all from my brain,
Yeah. I had a similar experience. So in 2010, I think that for anyone listening who's trying to get into the mindset piece, I think that this idea that you have to pump yourself up for an event is actually naive, or it's not the appropriate goal. So, and I'm raising my hand saying like, I was that guy. But let's just take even a marathon, or, I've done 10Ks, half marathons, whatever. You think like, oh, I have to pump myself up, or maybe this is just me before. And I remember this is 2010, we're at the Home Depot Center. I had to wait all night for this event because they wanted to do it underneath the lights. And so earlier that day, I drank a Red Bull, like 2 hours before the event, thinking like, oh, I gotta be jacked up. I gotta be ready. And it's just such misguided information, because when the 3, 2, 1 goes and the lights turn on, like you're going to perform and you're going to execute, and you will be amped up. Like you go in front of 10,000, 20,000 people, you're going to be amped up. You don't need anything else to amp you up. That includes music and stuff like that. And so what I learned over the years was that, music should be something like country, low key, reggae, etc. You should try and take your mind off these events earlier in the day. Just try and take yourself and your levels down and not hype it up. And so the advice I gave these people at the track meet the other day, these girls, they wanted to warm up like an hour or 2 hours before. I'm like, dude, just sit, chill, relax, just talk to each other. With 20, 30 minutes before your event, I'll come and get you, and I'll warm you up specifically to get your mind and body right for the event. But it's just anyways, it only comes with experience, right? The more you compete, the more experience you get, the more you realize that that's actually doing your body detriment.
Yeah, I think it was like Josh Bridges, who I first saw talking about that, because he would train in absolute silence with, not being pumped up by yourself too. So it's really hard. Like for anyone listening, try to go do like a Fran by yourself with no music, like 10 reps in, you're just going to be like, fuck this. This is really hard, because you don't have the gym around you firing you up. You don't have the music. And I thought that was a really good tool that he would use, that he's just going to train alone with no music and get really into that like pain cave. And so that when you do get put in the environment where there's people cheering and there's loud music, like you can thrive off that. But you also don't want to amp yourself up too much beforehand, like you're saying, because it plays such an important role.
Yeah. It's definitely a skill you have to develop too. And I think even like for me with my races, like that's something I've really had to work on is kind of, and this is a Jeff Cunningham quote, but the hay's already in the barn. You've already done all the work up until that point. So you should be relaxed, right? Like I've done all the preparation I need to for this. So now it's just time for me to go showcase that, and finding the ability to do that can be pretty difficult. But I know on the races where I have, as you're saying, like come in, listen to chill music, just go into it with an open mindset, not getting jacked up. It's amazing how much how much higher my performance was overall, because you just come out very relaxed. Like, hey, I've got nothing to prove except to myself here. I know that I've done everything that it takes to get to this point.
Yeah, and that's easier said than done. But I agree with you 100%. Like I've been in like super stressful events before. Like you're like this one event, for example, we did at Camp Pendleton. We left on the bus at 4 a.m. and it was just like you could cut the tension with a knife. Like it's pitch black outside. You're about to go to Camp Pendleton to go do a triathlon event with a bunch of dudes who are trying to kick your ass, not physically, but they wanted to win just as bad as you did. And it was moments like that where you try and stay calm, and you do stay calm, or you need to. It's hard. Or other moments, for example, over the years. But I think that there's something that's been helpful for me, at least, has been this idea of like the earned confidence. And I've talked about this a little bit before, but it's just even wearing a wristband. So at the CrossFit Games, I would just wear a wristband that said "earned" on it, and the reason why I did that is to remind myself that like no one gave me anything. Like I earned the right to be there just like everybody else did on that bus. Right. Like, but it wasn't given to me. I earned my spot. And so I'd also earned the confidence to be there by putting in all the work leading up to that. And so I should just go out there and just go express it. But this idea that it wasn't just given to me, it wasn't perceived confidence, it was earned confidence through hard work, I think was just valuable for me to lean on to keep my confidence and perspective high, just like you guys with boards or different MDs or whatever you're talking about. Like no one gave you anything. You had to earn that. And I think that's an important skill set to develop, because whether you're getting ready for a half marathon, like if you've been putting in the miles, you've earned your right. Now, other times, right, you might not have been putting in the miles, so you might not have earned it. And then your confidence might drop completely because you haven't put in the hard work,
Yeah,
absolutely. And that translates to so many other things in life too, right? Like you were saying, I've done the work to be here, so I really should have no reason to not be confident in my ability. I may not be the best, but I've done the best that I can to prepare myself for this. I think that's awesome.
I think there's a lot of obviously lessons learned there. And that's something I lean on all the time, right? It's just this idea of earned confidence, whether it's, getting ready for a presentation I'm going to give or whatever it is. It's like putting in the reps in hours. So you really feel like when you go in there, like you can't expect a result that you haven't put in the work for. Like I competed in the CrossFit Open and like I did okay, but like I can't expect, I ended up hurting my knee doing jujitsu, so I didn't finish the last workout. But in either case, I did okay, but I can't expect a result that I hadn't put the work in for. Like I wasn't preparing myself mentally and physically to win the CrossFit Games or to win the Open. So I can't expect to go out there and do that. And if I did, then shame on me,
Yeah. So when did you decide to go down the business venture side of fitness? Again, I think you were probably one of the first, if not like only at the time, that kind of outside of opening their own box and having the CrossFit title, you decided to branch that out and almost like, it's not a franchise at this point, right? It's just a multi
we have a license. We do have a license model, which we're evolving regularly. But sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, like, when did you kind of decide that you would go from that? Because like I said, it was kind of like, CrossFit was like the punks of the fitness industry. And I almost feel like a corporate gym like yours would have been almost frowned upon, because we're used to dirty, grimy gyms with no mirrors, and the dirtier, the better, the louder, the better, the more sweat and grime. And then, and almost like Looking Money probably was like kind of looked down upon in a way, because it was almost this grassroots organic thing.
Which is the detriment to the industry, by the way.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the worst things that's ever happened to CrossFit, I think, is the lack of consistency and this concept that money is a bad thing. I think that's a bad idea, because now here we are 2 decades later. And this idea of like running a business, the culture was always one of like no, you can't talk about money and being successful like you're being you're being Globo Gym, or you're selling out. It's like, dude, you're missing the point here. Like, if we don't make money, how can we give our coaches more money? And if we don't make money, how can we ever provide our athletes with a premium product? And if we don't make money, how can we go back and give to philanthropic efforts we really care about? Like, if you don't make, you can't give. Like, I don't get it. This idea of like being a hobby and being in a, just because you want to treat it like a business doesn't mean you don't care about the culture and the experience your members get. I'm not saying that that's not right. That's not the goal, but the goal is to run a successful, sound business that's profitable, so you could have something that lasts for the next decade, 2 decades. You could provide for your family and other families. So yeah, I mean, early on, it was really important for me to treat it like a business and not like a hobby. And I think that was because I had early mentors who just were all business. Then I found CrossFit, which was like all not business. And so it was just bridging those two gaps to build something where I could, provide for coaches and grow an audience where we can make a bigger impact on more people.
Yeah, it's super cool. When did you decide to drop the CrossFit and become like just NC Fit? And is there a reason to that?
Yeah, I mean, so like that was back in 2016. We basically branded. So we're still affiliated with CrossFit. We just reduced down from NorCal CrossFit NC Fit, primarily because at the time, this is years ago, things were different with CrossFit. And I wanted to be in control of our own destiny and our own brand and where we wanted to go. And I didn't want to be attached to a brand that I had no control over. And I think if you talk to anybody, they would understand that. Like, you don't want to be attached from the name perspective to something that literally they can go do anything they want and you're guilty by association, or there's preconceived notions. So for us, we wanted to be in control of like the first impressions and the narratives that come from it. And now, CrossFit's evolved a lot since 2016. And so now, we're affiliated with them, but we don't have it in the name of the business.
Gotcha. And what is your modality still basically rooted in CrossFit, or have you branched out and developed other things too? Like, are you your own fitness now?
We've done a lot of different things, obviously, over the years. I'd say traditionally we've tried many things, but ultimately we came back around to just like a little bit more of our expression of traditional CrossFit is what we primarily offer. We do offer, functional bodybuilding, and we're going to lean more into a program to help LEO, military, and people who want to protect themselves in the future. But currently, our big offering here at all of our gyms and whatnot is going to be a more, CrossFit focused program. And we've, like I said, over the years, I mean, you got to remember, we opened in 2008, so it's been 15 years. We've had a lot of evolution, a lot of growth, and a lot of changes. But I think now we're really happy with where we're at in terms of the programs we're offering, the coaching we're delivering, and the products we offer online. So that's our core business. So our core business is a brick and mortar. We then sell our programs to other gym owners who want to use those programs. And then we have an end user app. And that'll be a big focus for us in the future as well.
How many locations do you guys have right now?
Owned, operated, licensed, or corporate wellness, about 30. But then, like I said, we service many gyms through our NC Fit Collective, and then we service many athletes through our app, and that's really where we want to go in the future. What we want to be about in the future, and in business, it's ebbs and flows. It's this goal of never settling. Like this idea that like who you are today is not who you're going to be 10 years from now, and if you are, then you're probably missing the point. Like we were something, we've evolved, and we're going to continue to evolve. And I think where we're going to go, or I know where we're going to go, is this idea of helping people to train hard, because I believe in that. I believe in training hard and putting in the effort with the goal of living free. And I think that's really the premise of where NC Fit is going, is train hard, live free. And the idea of live free can mean many things to many people. But for me, it means the ability to keep up with my kids. It means the ability to get up off the couch. It means the ability to protect myself and to protect my family. That's a really important core concept to me. I've gone from being a guy who wants to win the CrossFit Games to now I want to be able to, run, jump, fight, lift. All those things are very important to me core-wise, and that's where NC Fit is going. It's for people who want to align with that message.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, who's the people who could benefit from you? Are we talking about just your everyday person who they've never been in a gym and now they want to get fit because they got told they're pre-diabetic, or are you looking to, the already athlete and trying to make them better, or is it everyone in between?
I think for us, where we're going in the future, I think is a target demographic, 35 to 55-year-olds, predominantly males, but also females who are hard chargers, who want to get after it, want to improve their fitness, and want to be able to live free. And that's who we're going after. Like if you want to go and ride the elliptical, like good for you. If you want to go out for a walk, hell yeah. But if you want to really try and push the levels of your performance and get to a point where you're putting in the hard work to really be the best version of yourself, right? That idea of like reaching your potential, those are the people that we could help through our NC Fit app and through our gyms. And that journey might be different for everyone. Like for us, if we're working with LEO military and they only have a few days a week, we have a specific program that's going to be designed just for them. That's 3 days a week that I think really packs a big punch. But I think anybody doing anything is a great start. But where we need to get to is people who can really want to live free. And if you're just walking, I think you're limiting your potential of that idea because you're not incorporating external loading and or combatives, which I think are another really important concept of practical life.
That's awesome. When did you get into the combative stuff too? Because again, I think you're kind of like a trailblazer because you were into jujitsu before it was cool. Now it's like the new CrossFit. You got into CrossFit in 2008 before it was cool, or before, maybe a little before. And then you branched off this jujitsu thing that I was like, I know what that is, but why is he doing that? That's weird. But now you can't, throw a rock without hitting somebody who does jujitsu because everyone's talking about it. It's the new CrossFit. But what made you want to branch into that? How'd you get into that?
Oh, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. My story is pretty simple. I traveled the world for a long time. And I'd be in airports and people would always come up to me. And if they didn't know me because of CrossFit, what they would immediately talk about is like, hey man, you look pretty fit. Like, are you a UFC fighter? Are you, like, I wouldn't want to mess with you. Right. That would always be like the thing. And before I got into CrossFit, I was doing Muay Thai, which is like Thai kickboxing. And before that I was doing something called Sanshou, which is Chinese kickboxing. And I really fell in love with it. I fell in love with this idea of like striking and kicking and sparring. And that was very difficult because it would just beat you up. I mean, you would feel like shit I don't know if you guys have ever sparred, but when you kick somebody in their shin, even with shin guards on, it fucking hurts, man. Anyways. So I did that for a while and I really loved the idea of like learning these combative skills, especially stand up. But then I got into CrossFit and I stopped doing a lot of anything other than CrossFit because I didn't want to get hurt and I wanted to stay focused on my sport. So we ended up subleasing a space to a jiu-jitsu gym, and I would always watch them and think that it looked like human chess. I thought it was the most beautiful expression of human movement because it was so dynamic in nature. One person does something, the other person reacts. The other person, it was just like chess. But I knew that I couldn't get into it because I was competing. So when I finished competing professionally in CrossFit, my daughter got sick in 2016, and so I stopped competing professionally. When that happened, I was looking for something to pursue, and I went back to this idea that I was always like the fittest guy in the room, but could I really handle myself self-defense wise? And it always bothered me, It was always like one of those things like, I look fit, but am I really all show, no go? Is that really what I am? Like, but I could do a lot of things. But anyways, so I wanted to be able to protect myself and protect my family. And I wanted to start depositing checks in this bank account that I felt like would have helped me for the rest of my life. So I got into jiu-jitsu in 2016 and I just haven't looked back because I look at it like a retirement fund. I'm just putting in checks 3 days a week, learning more skills, opening my mind, and developing self-defense that I think will help me for all the days of my life. And I hope to never have to utilize those skills. But if I do, I could fall back on my training, which I think is really important.
What kind of skills outside of having to defend oneself do you feel like you're developing? So let's say you never get in a fight. Hopefully you don't. What other kind of things have you gained from martial arts?
Well, I think that by fighting as much as I do, it's actually going to help me not to get in a fight because my comfort level is so much more than other people. I mean, I've been training jiu-jitsu now for 6-7 years. I have a background in stand-up as well. Like my comfort level in an environment has gotten more comfortable because I'm not afraid anymore, or I don't have to feel like I have to boast or be some like egotistical whatever. I'm regularly putting myself in a position of combatives with other people who are trying to do that too. So it takes this whole like ego thing and it drops it because first off, you realize there's always a bigger fish and there's always someone that could kick your ass. Always. I don't give a shit who you are. And then secondly, because you could get out that masculine energy and that you could leave the gym feeling very decompressed, relaxed. And so those are lessons that I've learned. And so I think that one, I think it just makes me a more focused individual, because when you're on the mats, you have to be focused. Two, I think it's been good to develop athleticism. Mm-hmm. And three, I think it's helped me to be more controlled and less eager to be anxious in a confrontational setting. And not that I really get into confrontations much, but I'm very casual, because this idea of being in one space is not uncomfortable for me. But if you're not used to that, I feel like, for my kids, like what I want for my son is to be the baddest dude in the room. I want him to be the guy who could fight, who could stand up for himself and the people he cares about, but to also be the one who could open the door, treat others with love and respect, and to give hugs and to be that guy too. I want him to be that. I want to be the blend of someone who can be capable and competent, but also loving and compassionate. I think that's really important for me. And those are the same skill sets that I'm trying to develop for myself.
Yeah, it's cool. It's like Jordan Peterson talks about, which I thought was like so eloquently put, where he talked about, if you're just a meek and humble guy and you say, that's not virtuous in any way, because that's just who you are. But if you are powerful and scary and, you can inflict harm, but you choose not to, that is, that's something to be proud of, because you have the ability to hurt, but you don't do it. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And that's the goal. So that's the goal for me. That's the goal for my family. And it's important to me. It's a core value now. And that's evolved, right? Like I wasn't feeling that way for many years, but I was always drawn to martial arts because of the reasons I was talking about. But once I found jiu-jitsu, it's really impacted my life in so many ways. It's very similar to CrossFit. CrossFit, the community, the culture, it really changed it and impacted my life. And I feel like jiu-jitsu has done the same thing. The culture and the community is very similar. They're both groups of people that really want to evolve and grow as individuals and support each other. They're just kind of two different worlds, which is why I think that people that do CrossFit should do jiu-jitsu, and I think people that do jiu-jitsu should be doing CrossFit. I think it's a beautiful combination. And I think for anybody who's doing bodybuilding and things like that, if you are going to get interested in jiu-jitsu, just my recommendation is, like, you got to leave the ego at the door. Mm-hmm. And you should start off maybe even with some just private sessions, but you got to just kind of take it down a notch, because the problem with bodybuilders and CrossFitters, and I'm talking about myself here too, is that when I first got started, you don't understand how you're going to feel to somebody else. So what happens is you get into jiu-jitsu, you don't know much. You don't know anything. The likelihood of you getting, submitted or whatever by someone with more experience is going to be very, very high. But the problem is when you get there, you're very strong and physically active. And so when they feel your strength, they escalate because they're worried. And then you escalate because they escalated. And then what ends up happening is this escalation occurs not because of your skill set, but because you come off overbearing, like you're trying to hurt them, and they freak out. So my recommendation is for anybody who wants to get into jiu-jitsu, just level set the playing field before you start any type of jiu-jitsu or rolls. You'd be like, hey, look, I have a background in something else, and I'm going to try and work with you I'm going to try and stay calm, because I've seen it just escalate and get out of control.
Yeah, I bet. Are you familiar with Aikido?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't trained it much, but I know about it. Yeah.
My dad was like a black belt in Aikido when I was coming up, so I'd see it a lot. But it's pretty cool because it's like I feel like it would probably have some good carryover, because they're literally like doing a dance, where you learn how to almost absorb the other person and use their momentum against them to throw them and stuff. So you can't be hard. Like I remember being little and I'd go to some training sessions with them, and like if you were rigid and muscly at all, you were screwed, because it was all about like, how can I conform and move? And it's very like natural kind of stuff. Like they're, Zen and Ki and all that with the earth, and they're trying to flow like the ocean. I think it'd have some pretty cool carryover, because a lot of times the most muscular bound people in martial arts don't do very well. Like you said, you put so much effort into it that it's like two bricks against each other.
Yeah. My recommendation is for anybody who's listening to this podcast who's been debating about trying a martial art, I would encourage them to do so. And I think jiu-jitsu is a good way to do it, because it's a cool skill set to develop that you can do over time, and it also finishes the position. Whereas in things like Krav Maga and others, there's some hypothetical application, which is fine. But in jiu-jitsu, it's nice because you can actually complete the task of submitting somebody without hurting them. And it allows you to have comfort in controlling somebody without having to strike them, which I think is good.
That's cool.
Yeah.
We have a lot of clients that come through Marek that do jujitsu. You said you would suggest that they do CrossFit. Like, can you get a little bit more into, there's a lot of people who just do jujitsu and want to be really good at it. They come to us saying, I'm training this way and I want help recovering and all that. But if you're somebody who's getting really into jujitsu, what would your accessory training be like?
It's a great question. One thing I do know for sure is like this idea of RPE is something we've really been incorporating at the gym, this idea of rate of perceived exertion. I think that what you have to realize is, like, for me, I try an RPE 10 every time I do jiu-jitsu and RPE 10 every time I do CrossFit. And it's just not a sustainable model for the rest of my life. So I've had to come to that conclusion. I was talking to Jocko and I was at his gym and I was rolling jiu-jitsu right in front of him. And so I was going at it hard, not just because he was there, because in general, I just, that's my whatever. And the guy I was going against was very talented. I finished my roll and I go over to him. I was like, hey man, so what does your training split look like between like fitness and jiu-jitsu? And he goes, I train both almost every day, but I don't train them at the intensity that you're doing it. And it like really like opened my eyes, this idea that it's just not sustainable because I'm going too hard. And so what I've done now is I've taken my jiu-jitsu down to like an RP 8 out of 10, like hard, but not crazy. Maybe like 1 or 2 hard rolls in a day, which are like 6-minute rounds. So it's nothing crazy. And then I've added in jiu-jitsu 3 days a week and CrossFit 3 to 4 days a week is my typical split currently. And what I find is that if you're doing jiu-jitsu, I think working the time domain of about 10 to 12 minutes where it blends this gap of anaerobic and aerobic kind of thresholds, I think is a good time domain for like your HIIT training. And I think adding in some supplemental strength, like 5x5, back squat, deadlifts, things like that, higher rep. You don't need to go for a 1 rep. I don't think there's value anymore. I just don't see value anymore at 1 reps unless that's something that's important to you. I think you should be doing sets of 3 to 5, maybe tempo training, and supplementing with things like traditional deadlift and traditional back squats and traditional bench press. I think those once a week plus a 10 to 15 minute, EMOM or AMRAP, I think is a great way to supplement jiu-jitsu 2 to 3 days a week.
Any questions on that, Josh? I know you wanted to dive into the training modalities with them.
Yeah, let's talk.
And I know, and I think that's great. I mean, because even, I'm not on the jiu-jitsu side of things, but between my cardiovascular training and then my compound movements with resistance training, I very much kind of structure it the same way. And even adding in, a lot of stability work there too, when I'm doing, some of my accessory bigger movements, always starting with those, adding in, that accessory movements with the mobility, things like that afterwards. And I think just, you can train them all in conjunction, but to your overarching point, you have to learn how to really work on the intensity with them. And that was something that I really had to learn as well, because if you go too hard on one of them, it almost is to the detriment of everything else. And it's almost this kind of dance that you have to adapt with your training, which is cool once you get it down, because you feel them all kind of working in conjunction with each other as you continue to move along. Yeah,
I think you brought up a really good point. I think it's important to note is the accessory work. Something that I have probably not done a good job of is I've been too focused on big movers and not focused enough on little movers. So whereas bodybuilders, I think, might be the opposite, where they're more focused on, single isolation of the delt or the whatever. I think that for me, I went so anti that I went only big movers. Like, unless you're moving a large load, long distance quickly, I'm not interested in it. So meaning like the idea of doing shoulder shrug or lateral raise or forward raise or whatever would be very foreign to me. And I think that what ended up happening is I developed muscles in a more, I should have spent more time over the years. And I still think now developing the smaller, like doing accessory work and in addition to regular. And something I've noticed is my knees. So we had this, I don't know if you've heard of knees over toes guy. He was just at our gym.
Oh yeah.
And so he was working with me on some accessory lifts and movements, and like, I think they're called Peloton step ups, or I'm butchering the first name, but just like step. So you basically, you put your foot on an elevated position on a plate, and you just basically perform like these step up positions. And it's like bodybuilding your knee. It just pumps your knee and quad like I've never felt before. Adding in those and backward sled pulls have been really good just to kind of build up my knee. those are things that I haven't incorporated in the past, and I need to, because now that I'm getting older, I need to incorporate a little bit more of those like specific muscle groups versus looking at it as the compound joint.
Yeah. And I think guys like knees over toes are so valuable because, I've incorporated a lot of that into my training, just more from a prehab standpoint. And I'm sure it's same with you. I'm like, man, if I had just known this stuff 10 years ago, I probably would have been so much more of a well-rounded athlete, saved myself a lot of injury. And I mean, that really translates to any sport. I know he kind of comes from a basketball background, but I'm like, man, so many kids nowadays, they're very lucky that they're, privy to that information and have that level of training, so easily and so readily available to them.
Yeah. I mean, I think for kids, the goal of the gym should be to supplement their sport as far as I'm concerned. Like, I think kids should be playing as many sports as possible until they identify what they want to pursue. And then obviously should be focused on that. But I think that the gym's goal should be to supplement what their sport is not giving them. So for example, my son loves baseball and football. And so I know that he's getting sprint work. I know he's getting eye-hand coordination. I know he's getting some lateral movement. I know he's getting XYZ, but he's not getting external loading. He's not getting posterior chain, whatever. Like I could just think about the things he's not getting. And so how do I utilize the gym to supplement those things? So he is getting some long, slow distance training because he's not getting that right now in either of those sports, as an example.
It's awesome. Two other things, I guess, to kind of wrap up. You are big on both cold exposure and heat exposure, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, we've talked a lot about that on here, just basically because there's a lot of pushback from the evidence-based community on these type of modalities. Like, I don't know, you probably don't see it, but I unfortunately have to, where people are talking crap about like Huberman and stuff and how cold exposure isn't any good. And I'm just like, I think you guys are missing the point here, where I think it's more of developing the mental toughness rather than anything else.
100%.
Yeah. So hopefully you, as a proponent of these, maybe you could talk a bit about like what you've gathered from them or what you get from them, because you do it daily, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the argument is it's just, they're literally, there's no argument because, well, I guess you can make the argument. Okay. So if you said, hey, so Huberman now is saying, hey, if you're strength training, don't get into a plunge or a cold therapy for, I think it's post 3 hours after you strength train.
Sure.
Is that right? I don't know. Is it 3 hours? Is it 4? Is it 2? Who knows? I don't think it matters. I think what matters is that getting into cold water sucks. And, doing that puts points on the scoreboard to start the day off. Mm-hmm. It physically and mentally pushes you to learn how to calm your nerves. And you're intentionally putting yourself in a moment of adversity, which you need to learn to overcome. Those are like undeniable benefits you get, regardless of the anti-inflammatory, testosterone boosting. Who cares? I mean, those are great auxiliary. But the fact that you're intentionally putting yourself in an uncomfortable position, learning how to breathe and control yourself, and then overcome that, I think has leaps and bounds benefits for your daily life. And that is why I think cold therapy is critical for myself and my children. Now, with the sauna, I try and go in the sauna every night. Sometimes I don't, because it does take a little bit longer. Like the plunge is pretty straightforward. Yeah. Sauna, you got to heat it up. You got to get in it for like, let's just say 20, 30 minutes. Like it takes a while. And so, but when I get in it, I found that my sleep is significantly better. And so in particular, I think that from a sleep support and also just like it just feels good just to sweat out. I think those are the benefits I get from sauna. Other than that, like I'm not trying to be a scientist. I'm not a scientist. I'm just telling you what I like,
Yeah. See, I love that because again, it goes back to the beginning where we talked about like, you were never into the supplements and you were never into this fancy stuff. It was just like, dude, I'm going to do hard work. And then you've seen it, pay off in the massive dividends, which is awesome. And that's kind of the argument we've made on the podcast too, is like this cold therapy, like no shit, it's going to blunt hypertrophy. No one said I'm getting into cold plunge to get bigger muscles. Like everyone's saying I'm getting in this to expose myself to something difficult, the same way that you would do a Fran and just be like, this is highly uncomfortable. Is it going to grow you bigger delts from, doing like 45, thrusters? Probably not. And no one said it was going to. What it's going to do is make you get very uncomfortable in a controlled environment so that when life does get tough, you can remember, hey, I've done hard shit before and I'll be able to push through just like I did, in the shower this morning, or when I was at the gym doing that crazy workout of rolling and I was almost submitted, but I fought through and, was victorious. So I think it's awesome.
I call it micro doses of adversity. And it's just like these micro doses throughout the day that you can incorporate. So for example, I think the gym is a great place to do that. I think the mats are a great place to do that. I think cold therapy is a great place to do that. I think that those are great opportunities for you to kind of, for lack of a better term, to steal from Goggins, like callous your mind. Like, I think those are great tools, and you don't know when those tools are going to be called upon, but when they are, you're going to want them, like, I always say this, like the best gift that CrossFit Games ever gave me was not my fitness or a six pack or fame or money or whatever, right? It was the fact that I learned to overcome adversity. And when my daughter got sick with leukemia, that was a critical mindset tool that we incorporated as a family. And so those are the benefits you're getting. Like everything else is like supplemental. Like the biggest benefit is exposing yourself to hard shit, because life does get hard. And if your life isn't hard, good for you. But eventually it probably will get hard at some point, and doing these things will help you overcome that, I think.
That's amazing. And for those listening too, I always talk about like you said, the micro, and micro is different to all of us. For Jason, his micro is a lot, and for some of us, it might be like sometimes picking the stairs over the elevator.
Right.
For some, that might be super hard. But when you make that choice, like that small little victory, you go, I did something harder this time rather than easy. And it pays off so much in life. So that's awesome. And I think, like I said at the outset, Jason's kind of the epitome of that, of somebody who shows that hard work and exposing themselves to difficult things will get you far in life. And so it was an honor to have you on, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I really want to dive deeper in the future. I know you and I have talked about the blood work, but I'm fascinated by it. I think it's really interesting. I'd like to see how my numbers trend over time. I'd also like to see what I could do naturally to, enhance myself. So we'll have to stay in touch about all that kind of stuff, because I just feel like for me, as I've gotten older, like my joints hurt a little bit more, and I have to spend more time doing like range of motion and flexibility work. But I wonder if my blood work could show me anything that maybe I could be taking or doing that would help me. So we could talk about these offline.
Yeah, I was gonna say, maybe let's do a series about it where we do initial blood work, and then we'll set you up with a Marek plan of supplementation and everything, and continue to get lab work and meet every 3 months or so, and correlate that with your performance and your subjective feeling and everything.
Yeah, because right now the way I just want to feel good. Like I want to feel fired up, ready to rock, and I feel that mentally. But sometimes my body doesn't, keep up with me. But anyways, in the mornings, what I do is I train the kids in the morning. And when I train the kids now, instead of doing like the bike, which I used to do, now I just do flexibility work in the morning. And it has a tendency just to jumpstart my day in a better way.
That's awesome. Oh, one last thing I wanted to ask you about the sauna real quick. I forgot. I should have brought it up then. Terrible host. Do you drink like water right after the sauna? That's been my fear, because I don't want to wake up peeing, which I already do anyways. But like, do you go to bed just thirsty, or do you drink water to replenish?
So I drink water. So the way I typically drink water is in the morning. The first thing I do is I pound so this is like a big Yeti jug, right? So I'll drink like 2 of these immediately in the morning. And the reason why I do that is I feel like it just jumpstarts my day from a hydration perspective. And I feel like then I have to like keep up with it, because I feel like I'm thirsty more often than if I start the day with no water. In regards to the sauna, I'll typically bring this in there with me with the intention of finishing it. And then I don't really think much about drinking more or less water before I go to bed. If I wake up, I have to go pee. I do. It is what it is. But I try and just drink when I'm thirsty as the day goes on. First in the morning, intentionally like overload it, because I feel like then I'm keeping up with it. I don't know. Maybe it's like a psychological thing, but that's what I bring one of these in the sauna with me.
Okay. Yeah. I was just wondering, because I don't have a sauna at this point. I want to get one eventually. I just do as hot of a shower as I can at this point, just because you're right. It does improve sleep by warming your core temperature. You'll actually cool yourself down, and it will put you to sleep. That's like the science of it. So I do that, but I was just wondering, if I went into a sauna, I usually know that I dehydrate the hell out of myself, because I lose a few pounds of water. And I was just wondering what I should do around sleep, but I'll figure it out.
I mean, to also just to clarify, I typically go in the sauna either right before dinner or right after dinner. So I still have like 2 to 3 hours before I go to bed. I go to bed pretty early compared to probably most people. But I still have like 2 hours before I go to bed. So at that point, there is opportunities for me to rehydrate. I think if I were to like get out of the sauna, take a shower and go to bed, that'd be different. I don't do that.
Gotcha. All right. I understand. Any other questions for him, Josh? Should we wrap this up?
I think it would be awesome to see what we could do to optimize you naturally, though. The guy we just had on yesterday, Lucas Owen, that's kind of his bread and butter is, younger guys and older men optimizing their testosterone, other markers through natural pathways. So, I mean, with somebody who's obviously as extremely dedicated as you are, I think there would be a lot of, great work that you could do there and probably would blow your mind, I think, with, post-lab results to see where they go.
I'd like to see what kind of difference you feel too with a level, because like we said, you have a pretty low testosterone, to be honest. A 400 is not great. And, if we got you to an 800, 900, do you feel any different? Or are you like, because that's what happens. We see a lot is actually guys are like, oh, I'm on TRT and it's not that great. It's not much different. And so it'd be interesting.
I don't know how I could feel any better. Like in terms, like, I don't know what benefits I would feel from going from 400 to 900. Cause like, I feel like I have high testosterone. I don't know. Like, I don't know what the difference would be. Right.
That'd be cool. Yeah, let's do it. Cool, guys. Well, I hope you guys all enjoyed the episode. We will see you guys in the next one. Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Jason. That was fun.
Yeah. I don't know how I would feel if cause like, I don't know what I would feel like.